Thanks. Thank you very much for that introduction. Very flattering. And thank you, Tom, for inviting me as well here today. As mentioned, my name is Emma Lundgren, and I'm Swedish-born designer and artist. For the past 15 years, I've been living in London, Paris, Germany, and now here in San Francisco. I started my journey as BA at Central St. Martin's in London as a textile designer. And afterwards, I moved to Royal College of Art, where I did my MA and in mixed media. And that's kind of all these different times at Central St. Martin's and Royal College of Art kind of opened up my eyes to collaborate. Collaborate with probably more time at automotive level of the programs and product design, jewelry, actually than in textile department. Everything because I was curious, I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to use different kind of materials when I was doing my work. So, I'm a color material design specialist, and I've been working in different kind of areas of the industry: fashion, textiles, consumer electronics, currently transportation, doing a bunch of teaching and lecturing when I was living in London, and also accessory design. So I'm going to talk you through my journey, how I started more or less as an artist, and now in the automotive industry. That's going to be the focus. During my MA and BA, I definitely learned that I have a passion of telling stories through material and color combinations. How they are put together tells a story, and also where I kind of want to go, the purpose of the message. And always kind of picking meaningful topics, everything from neglected species to nature or Samis, and I will tell you more about it further on. Raising awareness through art. So here's kind of where my journey started. So during my BA, I started looking into folklore dresses, which is the expression back in the day what Scandinavians have to tell the stories where they're from, and they use the color and material for it. At the time when I was doing this, they were very neglected. No one was wearing these outfits. So I saw it as my cause to kind of raise awareness. Instead of writing topics about it or demonstrating, I took my hands and my art to work. So using color material and express my kind of way of working. I was collaborating with photographers, stylists, set designers, everything to kind of get my approach, my vision of highlighting a topic. Stories with strong underlying messages. This is another way. I use graphics to tell stories, where I'm from and where I am at the moment. So this is kind of Kurbit's paintings that I have done digitally. Usually they are hand painted on clogs, for example, or furniture in Scandinavia. But I always wove in a little bit of umbrella and a Big Ben, because I was living in London at the time. And these messages kind of got a lot of publicity. So I started showing in Paris, in Tokyo, New York, London, Sweden, and they got me some other gigs. They're creating one-off pieces with materials. So this is a piece I did for New York Fashion Week. So my focus is always telling the story. This was obviously about folklore and sustainability. So I'm using materials that are left over from when you're building a boat. Scraps that comes under the desk that I just kind of wanted to take aboard and make something new of it. All this kind of expression of being curious, looking at the materials in different ways, telling the stories, got me to Paris, where I was working on crafting for attention in a different way. Just crafting for attention on the catwalk. How do you get a message through from the clothes, but also the accessories? The accessories, they're only for the catwalk to kind of emphasize the message that you want to have, which I was doing in Paris for John Galliano. And through that, I realized that seasons and fashion, which is continuously just being produced, is not really my passion. I want to be somewhere else where you can create a piece that you hold and you have the message. If you buy a piece or invest in something with money, you want to have that with you through life, instead of just having it for a moment and then you chuck it away. So I got in contact with a creative director from Brussels that was doing this exhibition about sustainability, but also how fashion is kind of polluting the world. So this piece was about how the world would look quite polluted, black, or you have to kind of save the flowers. Those pieces you can screw on and off with the flowers. So kind of captivating the beautiful things we have today, but for the future. So this was on an exhibition traveling around the world, New York and Paris, London, and the Netherlands. So this is my first flirtation with transportation. So being an artist, I started looking into how can we improve transportation. So being on a bike, I'm usually on a bike, as Tom has noticed when I'm visiting here at Academy. on the little Brompton. But when you do biking around, you kind of need your tools with you. You want to be visible. Things should be lightweight so you can go quicker. You should be able to listen so you can hear when you're coming. So I involved all of that into my artwork. So this is vacuum-formed foam as a headpiece to protect you when you bike. I know it's not very functional. This is before my functional design came in. And you have bells so you can hear me when I'm coming, and reflection. Crafting for attention, again, going back to that telling a story, and you can actually send a message and a purpose through your materials and what you are designing. This is a design piece, one outfit of 20 that I did for raising awareness to the natives in Scandinavia called the Samis. This is kind of a political message. So at the time, they didn't have much attention. They've been really badly treated through the years. So I took action of raising this collection and made attention to it. So I'm using new techniques and new technologies with embroidery. And this got a lot of attention in magazines. I exhibited around the world as well, all to create attention to people that actually really need it. And to summarize it, so I found my passion of talking through, express myself through materials, exploring different genres, exploring different combinations. And this is kind of still with me. This is something I do outside my other work. And that's why I kind of just want to send that message. Find something that you really love doing and explore it, experiment with it, and challenge it, because that would kind of give you the boost and energy of the other sides that you are doing on the side. So these are some pieces that I actually exhibited here in San Francisco a couple of months ago. Again, exploring different materials together just to make it look like leather, but it's actually recycled plastic that I've been bonding together and embroidering into it. So this world was where I started out, and how I kind of got connected, I networked, I met a lot of people, I got publicity, but there were no boundaries. It was kind of me, my world of how to express myself. But I went into a world where it has a lot of many boundaries. So I started as a color material designer at Nokia. So going from fashion, where you can just dream and everything works, into Nokia was a great challenge. There you have to pass through the feasibility test, you have to talk to engineering, you have to talk to industrial designers, graphic designers, and then back to suppliers, and to look at the small details. I'm usually thinking about the bigger picture in fashion. So it was a great learning curve. And I had to think about, how do you as a designer bring the creativity that you have in you when you leave college in a formal environment? How do you foster that? How do you keep that going? And I think if you can do that, you have a great success. So I started out after my MA at Ford as a contract designer. Here are some of the vehicles that I was working on, exterior and interior, and advanced design for it, and some concepts. So through being curious, challenging things, and kind of keeping that creativity of wanting collaborating, wanting to learn, socializing, going to the other departments, I came in as exterior paint specialist, but through that kind of connection in the environment, I got in to help out set up the advanced EMF, design and strategy department, and also the urban mobility, which was a great challenge. Again, thinking of how you communicate and how the different levels and the feasibilities, and you might have constraints, how can you push that in different directions to make something special? So I want to take an examples that I want to share with you where collaboration is key. So I got on my table quite early in my career at Ford to evolve the Ford sports expression. And this is a very good example of how you can design innovation through technology. So the RS is kind of calm and peaceful when it stands. It's a racing car, sports car, by the way, for here. It's very calm when the engine is not there. It's a function, it's standing on the parking, but people still adore it. Got a huge fan base. But when the engine kicks off and you actually use the vehicle, it has this amazing sound. And that's why lots of people buy the car. So I kind of want to combine that when I looked at nature. So when you look at the sea, it's this endless calmness. It's like beautiful, and you just get relaxed, right? And you're loving it. But when it starts moving, the nature kind of gets, the waves going, the sun hits it, it gets this kind of glittery shimmer effect, and it's the power of nature. So I wanted to have that, the power of nature, with the vehicle of having something that could be solid and calm, but when the sun hits it, it explodes, kind of as a glitter ball, just like the engine. And that was very easy to say. You then go to meet the chemist and you talk to the technicians. It's not so easy. But through collaborations, and we kind of pushed it. So when you push, technology and design kind of goes hand in hand. So this was one party, lovely story of it. You know, when you put together the mood boards and you talk about, you know, like Burberry, how they have the trench coat, the classic trench coat, and you change the material to make it more modern or attract more customers. But then comes this. Not so attractive all the time for the designers, but you have to take it from concept to production. And that's when you have to go through the loops of socializing with suppliers, give them briefing. You have to go technology optimization. You have to talk to your team members. You have to talk to the program. It's a lot of communication. It usually takes about 5 years to make a color. So it's a lot of communication through to get one color through, as you can understand. So, and we managed to get it through. So, and I'm very lucky that we had such a great team that was working on, that we all kind of pushed each other to make this happen. So this is one-off technology that's only on the RS at the moment, and was supposed to be a limited edition in Europe. However, we managed to ship it over here. So my heart always beat a little bit extra when I see it on the street in San Francisco, because I know how hard work it was for myself and for all the other ones involved. So that's one example of how a color material designer can work with technology. But also when you work as a color material designer, you have to think about the soft parts inside the vehicle, or the soft parts on a product, if it's a shoe as well. The finishes and the exterior, all of that has to tell the story that you want trying to tell together. And I was lucky that I could have experience through all of them when I was at Ford. Another part that comes is not just to execute and have an idea and take it into production. It's also talking about the strategy. What all you want to look at? For example, lightweight. Lightweight is something that we all kind of talk about now when it comes to electric vehicles, right? For the battery, it has to be lightweight to perform better. So creating mood boards, directions that you kind of want to socialize together with marketing, with your teams, but also the vision for the brand. But when you have the example of what the material that you want to put in, this is another example we pushed for. So when you have a material such as recycled or ceramic, you have to find a purpose. Why is it there? You can't just take a material, well, you can take a material, but if you have a material with a purpose and why is there, because it emphasizes the brand or emphasizes the experience, then you have the reason behind it. And if you can communicate that with the placement of where it's going to go, it's going to be nicer to maybe pick up your phone in the pocket, because then you remember it for the next time. Or you want to put your phone in there because it's soft and nice. So always have that kind of purpose and direction and story behind when you choose the material. I had the lucky adventure and experience to work at Advanced Design and Mobility in Ford. This is in London, in Soho, called the Ingenious Studio. I can't fortunately share too much work from this place. It's inside these doors. So when you went in, everything stays in there. But it was a great experience, and here I had to work with planners, sometimes politicians coming in, interior, exterior, engineers, software designers, great experience. And I think if you're not curious enough or want to explore and connect with other people, you know, if you are those things, I think you attract those people too. And that kind of led me to this place. One project I was working with from that studio was, I'm not sure if you've seen this in the news, Ford started tracking brainwaves and eye movements to dictate design. So we got the results from these interior bugs that we were making. And from there, we had to start designing new designs to see how we can take the brand forward, which was something super exciting and really challenging as well, because we only had the words that we kind of got back and diagrams. So I went from an American icon to a Chinese startup, hence why I'm here in San Francisco. And that is something really challenging. So you went from, again, quite a lot of framework to no framework at all. And working on just vehicles into a situation we have to work on the Neo House, Neo Life, which is kind of lifestyle products, and the cars. This was a huge challenge because there was nothing set up. So my role was here to kind of set things up and make things work and start communicating, set the framework. So I was based here in an innovation studio in San Francisco in Mission. That was kind of my journey in a fast track, kind of where I come from and how I ended up in the automotive industry and product world. So I want to kind of talk to you how you can use CMF as a communicator. Kind of got a little bit hint already. CMF is a design discipline that you're focusing on designing and specifying color, materials, finishes to support both functional and emotional attributes to the product. That's a very key message, I think. And by combining the aesthetic and the practical knowledge of the materials and the technologies with the human perceptions of intangible values, that also summarize what CMF can be. You can find it everywhere, almost. You can find them in vehicles, airplanes, energy, charging stations, footwear, as we know, AirPods, or like accessories that you have in your pocket. So CMF, you might think, is something that comes in the end of the product range. So when you design something, then you have kind of like a makeup. But CMF and color and material placement should be in the whole process of when you design a product, how it should feel. Because sometimes the material can actually lead to how you want to design in an interior and how you want to communicate something. It is an integral process that runs through in parallel with the physical and technical design of products. So always thinking, again, going back to what is the material you're going to use, how is it going to function within that space, what is going to tell you, what value does it bring, and that can also shape the part of what you're making. The visual appearance, of course, is very key, but it can guide you to some functions, such as here on the kickboard. It tells you that's where you're going to stand. But it can also be social trends that currently are happening, or just for that consumer they're using this product. So CMF can be function, but it can also highlight the items of what function areas. So going back a little bit someone who used this very well was Earl Harley. He is actually from San Francisco, and in 1927, he started up Art and Color section in General Motors, and he used this to kind of foster the demand of inventing kind of new styles. So when Ford famously only used black on the exterior of the cars, he decided to give an opportunity of different colors just to update the products, which was very clever. You can have them solid, or you can have them in metallic flakes, or for your kind of personal interest. Some brands that are doing it really well, are using CMF really, really well, is obviously Apple, Mini, and Nike. You kind of buy into the brand of how they're using it. They're also using a really great technology behind it. They're pushing material and color together. And by using CMF as one of the things that you push with your brand, is actually have higher value when you've done the research. So always think about that when you do design products or anything that comes with the materials, like combine it, don't just think about colors in the last part. Actually think how that can influence the design process. So when I was putting this presentation together, I thought I was going to talk about color one section, then material and finish. But I learned that it's very hard to talk about material and not color, and not finish and not materials. So here we go, one of these beautiful things of sharing. That is when you do color material design, it's just all blended in together. You can't do color without material, because if you have a color, you need to choose the material. But if you have a color and then you choose the finish, so if you have a soft touch, then you most likely will have more like a subtle color. But if you have a high gloss, it will be more vibrant. Everything has to communicate with each other. You also have to talk to suppliers, because maybe you can't do that color or that material. You have to go to marketing, manufacturing. So it's kind of a continuously spinning the plates when you're working in CMF, which is also very exciting, because it's never a boring moment, because everything is kind of happening at once. So as working as a CMF designer, I try them all. You can be independent, working with different clients at the same time. You can have a CMF consultancy. You can be like a contractor, which also gives you a little bit of freedom, depending on where you are. Or you can be an in-house CMF designer. All have different perks. I think it depends on where you are in life and where you live. I think when you're done with college, just go maybe in-house just to learn all the skill and trade. And then you can you have your own power later on, just to get the experience going. Inside tips. Here again, one of more of those attractive charts, but these are the kind of places where you can be as a CMF designer. You can be a trend forecaster, looking at the trends that you can translate into a color material story. You can do the strategy, you can have the surface design, but if you have the good experience, and you should be, as a CMF designer, be able to do them overall, just to combine. But as individuals, we all have our passions and like a desired focus to look at. So usually you kind of zoom into one or two. So as a CMF designer, you have to detect the aesthetic trends to identify articulate future design language. So everything from mood board and those materials and colors that are on the mood board, what they actually mean in your story. So if you have a specific color, what does that actually mean from the brand, for the consumer, when you send that message out? Is it just because of trends? Is it because of age? Is it because of region? Is it a global product? What's the message behind things? And going back to where I kind of started, experimentation is kind of key, especially when you are in college. Just go wild on experimenting. That's the best advice I can give. So when you're experimenting, like you can do everything from maybe cutting a new pattern for a shoe or a seat, because maybe you have a new materials that you want to shape and it doesn't work with the old pattern, or experiments with color and the finish to it, because you can have all kind of solutions unexpected solutions that you didn't think is going to appear, and voila, that they appear, and then you might have it answer straight away. Or you can try with when a soft material comes along. That can also be something that can be challenging, because maybe you have to wrap it, and then all of a sudden you have a pattern on top of it, and it starts cracking, or it doesn't shape, it looks disformed. So you have to just start experimenting, and then you can have your answers. The more you're experimenting, you're also building up a great library of just knowledge and a book of that you can go back, which is hugely valuable when you go into the industry. The functional content, when you look at material, something that also gives the function and the aesthetic and kind of sends that message of performance. The good old carbon fiber, we know it's going to perform. It's lightweight, it gives a very clear aesthetic direction of what it's going to deliver. Something more newer to that is Flyknit. It's soft, it's lightweight, but it also brings highly technical skills. So this is like two different directions that kind of have a great aesthetic, but also brings the performance to it. Another way you can kind of talk about functional content on the product, something like these. So when you are out walking with your sticks maybe, or you're skiing, you know exactly that you're going to put your hands there. Just because maybe you know it, but the cork will give you better grip. Or like the highlighted, the texture underneath the carpet, because you know it's going to stick better on the floor. Or the grip on the bottle. So again, you can communicate with the material, the textures, the finish, the pattern. So always kind of use that in your language when you design. So one that actually brought me also into automotive and transportation was when I was traveling as a younger, I always thought that airplane, buses, trains had the most awful seatings, just in colors and patterns. But now I kind of know why they do. It's because you don't want it to look too dirty when you sit on it. It's kind of camouflaging the dirt. But I thought this was quite brilliant. Even though it's camouflaged the dirt, it's also telling you to kind of transfer and said, here's the seat for people that needs it. So again, clever way of using pattern, colors to communicate something functional in the London Tube. Everything doesn't always have to be functional and have a purpose. It also has to have an emotional context. So for example, this little toolbox, it's red, it's not very expensive. However, everything is also sending messages of who we are, who we want to be, and where we want to kind of go next. So someone might have bought this one. I do know someone who bought this, very proud of it. He doesn't even actually use it. He has it in his bookshelf because it tells him, I'm a man and I got tools and I put them in a very nice toolbox. And it's red and it's shiny, it's steel, I don't buy the plastic. So everything doesn't always have to be ultimate performance. It has to also touch you emotionally for you to remember it and want to have it around. Such as one of the products I worked on. This is a solid gray. Most people in the automotive industry will go, that's an undercoat, before you put the paint on. The time when this was made, every car, racing car, sports car, had very vibrant colors and metallics into it. So it was a lot championing through this. But this color kind of came out in 2015. But the people that connected with it wanted to have this kind of understated statement. They kind of wanted that camouflage, have that kind of, not military, but wanted to have a little bit of edge to it, which they did. And this went from just being released for 500 vehicles to being the best-selling car in color in the UK, just because of that emotional connection through a color. Also probably there because it's on the RS. From emotional, moving on to something else going along with emotional design is sustainability. I'm sure you're talking a lot about it here at the college, but it's something that kind of used to be covered with other materials, used to be covered maybe with leather or plastics, funny enough, but now it's kind of bringing it to the forefront. It's kind of the new luxury people are talking about. But this is something that CMF and product design automotive is really looking into, like the i3 here, where they actually put it in the forefront. They're actually celebrating the material rather than actually adding more material on top. And this is also very interesting because then the material leads the function or like leads the form. Something to always think about. This might be obvious, but when you design with color materials and finishes, you have to think about how it sounds. You don't want to sit on a seat where you start making all cracking noise, right? And you don't want to maybe have to touch really plasticky, maybe rough materials. It obviously has to look good because otherwise you might not want to sit on it. But also think about when you sit in a new car or get a new pair of shoes. Some people love the smell of new shoes, right? When you pack it up. But some people can't stand it. So thinking about the scent that gives away the material or the color when you've done a product, people like to use it. And something else that kind of becoming and happening right now, and I think that's what you're also looking into, is the physical and digital. People call it phygital, shy-tech. Something here again, BMW was doing this model where you have traditional material involved together with technology. So the technology comes and goes when you need it. There's also something to explore, and I think that's a starting point where people should explore more. How does digital and the physical merge together today and in the future? Is it too many screens? Is it not enough screens? How can something more traditional, maybe like wood, combine with technology? How do you have the emotional contact, but don't feel it too out there and futuristic? Leaving it on something to think about for the future, and where I think it's the future, how you in the future can apply CMF in potentially automotive. Part of it can be energy recovery. How can you create a material or a color that saves energy for the battery, for example, or the charging stations, or maybe give you energy in your shoes so you can charge your phone? All opportunities. Recognition, how can someone recognize it when the car comes to you and you're ready to be picked up, or maybe you've been drinking a little bit too much, or you are going to another country, maybe change color so it knows where you're from. Well, how can it communicate with you? Can it communicate and say, hey, help, I need help? Or how can it communicate, hey, I'm free, you can use this car? All these are like where CMF can actually help out and communicate and collaborate with other disciplines. So the advice, to summarize it, for success from this presentation, I think, when going onwards, is to be curious, have a vision of where you want to go, but also understand the constraints and challenge those. So if you go into a company, always ask, why is that made? Because you might have a better idea or different idea. Be deeply collaborative. Join teams that you don't usually think you maybe fit into. Discover through experimentation. This is key. Never stop learning. Listen and do a lot. And balance the big picture with the critical details. Because sometimes the critical details can be the thing that actually make it a successful product. So my creative sketch session, as is my first one as well, is how would you use color and material to communicate your product's identity and purpose? You can choose any product you want and how the material can bring the purpose and emotional connection to it. It can maybe be a shoe, bottle, an interior. I don't know what disciplines you are. Everything that comes to heart. So thank you.
So I saw you work with the car company, the Chinese car company,
Yeah.
called NIO.
Yeah.
And I also know they work with layers design.
Sorry.
They work with layers design
Okay.
in London.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So do you guys do you know the layers?
Oh, the
Because
layer.
I feel your designs have similarity shares with layers. Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. So, yeah, layer design was working with the China team. So we were different teams. It was kind of a global startup in a way.
Yeah.
So I was here in San Francisco, and I worked for more the innovation team at that time. So working the early stages of what to come together. Layer was kind of more brought in, if I remember right, for kind of one-off products. Yeah,
Okay.
but they're good.
Yeah, I really love your works, like how you tells us about the color materials connects with the emotion, like all those give you a sense of the power. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much, Emma. I'm really fascinated how you came from a fine art background and how you said that you came from like no boundaries to boundaries. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about how that worked? Like conceptually, you can see there's so much depth to your artwork, and then how does that translate into the kind of the restrictions, like the challenges you face with maybe becoming more literal than conceptual?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Good questions. I got asked that quite a few times, but it's I think if you have the vision and you have no boundaries, you also challenge the constraints. So when you come into, I think as a designer, you need sometimes a lot of rules to break them. That's kind of what I said. In the end, you use it to kind of break and see where you can go with it. And I was lucky in that way when I came to Ford that I had a bunch of people that actually supported me and to take that creative vision and let that go loose rather than just kind of constrain myself into a formal company. So part of it is thanks to them that they let me go and discover a lot of things. But it was just a challenge to start communicate in a different way than I used to do. So instead of, as I mentioned, it takes about 5 years to do a color at Ford, for example, and many other OEMs. For me, it took about 3 days to make a piece. And that was like, night and day. So have patience, challenge, and be curious, I think, are the ones that I had to. And stay calm as well. Thanks.
Hi, Emma. As we know, sometimes materials can express the emotion.
Yeah.
Yes, but when the new material is born, how can I make sure what feelings this material convey?
You can, I think, depending on what company you might be in, or maybe you're working for yourself or a small startup. If you have experience enough, you probably know from like working maybe with the more psychology part of it, what a material will give. If it's a cold material, you probably have a cold reaction. But sometimes you can do clinics to understand, the consumer's response to it. But also asking around in the studio if you have a material and say, hey, how do you react to this? If this material will be on this part on a bottle, how would you feel like drinking out of the bottle? Or would you prefer this other material if we want to evoke a warmer feeling, for example? So I think, ask around your peers, because then you might discover things that you don't discover when you're kind of in it. But that way, yeah. Thank you.
What is your creative process, and does it differ when you're working on a car to when you're working on a shoe? Because the texture of those is very different, especially with coming to colors. Or is it like are the steps similar?
When I work by myself, then it's me, myself, and I. They kind of hang out and have a conversation, and that's how I get that out. But if I work, so I can take an example. When I'm was a Ford or someone more formal environment, there's usually kind of processes that you go through, depending on the department you're in as well. If you're in production or advanced or mobility, but they all have different. But usually it's, you have meeting, you gather around all the different in the program, they're going to design that product. And then you go through the research phase or inspiring phase and start sketching and talking and presenting. However, when I was with Neo, I had a totally different experience where we can get briefs, and then 3 days later they had to be sent off. But then I didn't have to deliver up to production. So I think each project and program and the way you are has their own kind of restrictions and ways of doing it. So yeah, everything from 3 days experimental send off to 3 years. So
Thank you, Emma. I'm not into cars, but then I have a little bit knowledge. Like I know that car for interior of the car, we usually usually use like leather. But BMW i3 used vegan leather first time, I believe, or I don't know, first time or whatever.
Yeah.
But what is beyond vegan leather? Like, is there anything that we are working on for sustainability in the car industry?
I think every brand have their own kind of focus of where they want to take sustainability and how they push it. And some car brands are more experimental than others, and some doesn't want to use vegan leather or leather at all. They go more towards like the textile and woven fabric. So I think it's more about thinking the process of when you use the material, any material, what happens when it's done? Can you use that material again, or does it just go to a dump? I think that's more what you have to look at. So how can you recycle the material that was in car A when it has to go back into the system again? So usually it has to know more like a linear is being made, and then it kind of ends up in a dump. So I think that's the future, depending on, it doesn't matter if it's leather or plastic or textiles, it all has to kind of have the ability to go back into the circle. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
No, in defense to the car company, everybody say, how come so slow to react to the thing, right? But each car takes 5 years, 4 or 5 years to develop. So we may be doing the same time with the fashion or anybody, the leading edge technology. That won't happen until 5 years down the road. So that's the difference between the car industry. The product design is 6 months lead time, shoe company 3 months lead time. So that was one of those things that takes a long time. And the fabric, the fire retardancy on the car fabric and leathers and all that is much higher than anything else in the world. So you can see, nice hand and nice leather. We can use it in the car companies because of the fire retardancy for the safety, for example. And then lots of colors. You said, I hate the colors. But we spent 2 years in every color to be ready to be produced. So we spent 2 years looking at 5, 6 years ahead of time to develop maybe 40 colors, and only 10 maybe come through to the production feasible, for example. It's a lot of work besides all the constraints and stuff, but the physical amount of testing we have to do for, like you're saying, this material lasts a long time. We have to at least, 10 years? For the warranty part is usually 10 years we have to make sure, right?
I think it's different restraints for different companies, but usually you have to, it takes about 5 years because you have to do the first round of deciding what colors they have to go through, 20 or 10.
So that's another one, because we have to warranty to pay for it. If your cell phone peeled the paint or something, you got a warranty, you don't. For example. So a lot of other stuff too.
There is some colors out there on certain, I shouldn't say the brands, but that you have to sign. So if you pick that color on that car, you have to sign and say, I know if my color goes a bit more pale, or if a bird, poop on it, it make a mark, it's okay. I take that, risk. And then you have to sign, and that's all good. So you can do that, or you can go through the more, restrictive forms of colors. So yeah, it's a long process to make a color or any material to make it feasible and get through all the different restrictions.
And the research said that why did you buy this car, and then price and performance and fuel economy, all the reasons, like logical reasons. So color is about 7th or 8th choice of reasons why you buy a car. But if everything is right, price, everything, but this ugly color, you buy this car. No. So the rejection color is a number 1 on the list. But people don't spend that much investment in a color because of the choices of number 7 or 8. But the reality is the rejection is number 1. So now the company realizes that the CMS is a lot more important than the numbers suggest.
It seems like we have a lot of limitation when we do stuff. Like when you produce stuff, you like a molding, everything, all those things. It's reality. Yeah, there is no way you can just go.
You can be more creative for sure, but you can be more creative with different rules. So instead of doing make more material within the framework and create more colors, maybe you make a color that has its own, segment or rules. So instead of making more reds, you can make a red that maybe, protect you in some way, or start doing other things, or that are good for the environment, or so and materials. Maybe you don't need 50 materials to make a car. Maybe you can cut it down to 20. So I think that's the creativity that might have to happen. Instead of producing more, use the creativity to produce less in a more conscious and thoughtful way. And when you can crack that in a very old kind of system of how to do cars, for example, I think that's when you're winning. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Really interesting. And actually kind of my question rolls into what Tom was saying as far as materials and function over time, which is in CMF, do you consider materials that evolve with the user at all? Like kind of denim has a tendency to, create a patina that tells a story. So is that something you consider?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Something, Tom is now laughing. Because of I think when it comes to jeans, for example, and how the way you wear it out, it kind of creates your personal brand on top of your jeans, right? The way you have been using it. Same with like Nudie, have that little tobacco circle on the back that kind of brings a little personality to it. When it comes to traditional way of doing automotive, it has to be perfect. And if there is the way of have it hide for doing the seats, if you use leather, you don't even want to have little scratching, cows that still scratch themselves when they go out before they actually become a piece of leather for a seat. So some companies don't even use that little mark, and some companies do. So I think it's the preciseness of not having some special mark is that little thing that automotive puts a little hurdle for themselves. And I think that's what also is a lot of waste. But I do love the approach that you are saying. I wish there was more of that. And I think we might be able to see that in the future. Yeah.
That's what I was considering. Is like, is there more space possibly to get around that? It ties into the wastefulness side of things, right? But it also would allow the user to kind of express themselves throughout it. And I love old cars. So I see that in old cars, you can see that like the evolution of that car and where somebody used it and how it changed. Yeah. But on the opposite side, when it seems like when a material isn't wisely chosen, you can have buttons rub off, or like they'll look like I guess dingy. So I guess rolling the two together, there seems to be like a really cool space for that. Hopefully in the future.
Yeah, that's what I hope for too. But I think it's when you buy a new car or have a new car, you kind of want it splendid, right? You want no faults on it. But I think that what we might call now faults or wear and tear, I think that could be the beautiful part of it, that you actually see it's been going in generation or had a life beforehand. Or maybe we can create material that doesn't, or tells a different story. But yeah, more of that, I hope. And I think we are in the middle at the moment, the middle ground, and I hope that goes towards the future where it happens. Yeah.
Not sure if I missed it, but is there any tip or how to start when you're starting to find a material for it? Like, how do you usually start, or if there's any tip for it?
How do you start? Yeah, depending on what you're making for a start, you go to what the message you want to send through that product and what functionality you want to give. Sometimes with a red box, for example, the function is to hold your tools, right? But it also has that emotional connection. So you have to think about how does it perform the material, what it's supposed to do, what's the emotional connection, and obviously the best part, is it sustainable? Can you reuse it? Again, it kind of lies of what kind of brand you're trying to create in product, but usually that's where you kind of have to look into what materials. And also, if you want to have a specific color because of your brand, you might have to limit yourself a little bit more. So kind of write down your values of what you're trying to achieve, and then go from there. Take off the materials. But maybe if you experiment, you might find your own material, which is the best. Yeah.
Thank you.
What is it that you do when you do get into a creative block, let's say, and you're like one of the things that you just mentioned right now is kind of writing down, what you're trying to achieve with the project, and maybe that usually can help you look for the right colors, the right materials and finishes. Yeah. But what do you do outside of, let's say, researching on your computer or just being in the studio? What kind of activities do you partake in that you feel inspire your approach when it comes to actually coming up with these narratives around the CMF for different products?
I usually connect with other design disciplines. That's usually even the classic one, go to museums and go for a walk, but also just be surrounded by people that do other disciplines. Because when you get exposed for different conversations, your brain kind of starts to open up. At least mine does. And then I get all these tips and tricks of how people are looking at it in a different angle. Because sometimes you can get so snowed in, right, that you don't really know how to take the next step. But for me, that's the kind of the key of talking and sharing and communicating. So if I'm in a more formal environment, I usually go to other departments, even so like engineering or planners, or just talking to anyone in the office about something, and then it usually comes to life. I think it's just always just open up the brain rather than close it down too much. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you again, Emma. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you guys for sticking around.